everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and last night I saw Transformers Rise of the Beasts, and there's gonna be a full spoiler review. There is something big at the very end of the movie that, honestly, I hope no one goes into this movie with that spoiled, because it really was like a shock, and I was like, huh, okay, and we'll get into that at the very end. But let's go into the movie itself first. So the first thing I'm gonna say is that this movie was actually pretty enjoyable, and it very much follows in the vein of Bumblebee, which itself was also like, it was very much in the 80s, and it was just such a different tone than all the classic Michael Bay movies, and this one definitely still feels a lot like the Bumblebee movie, but on a larger scale, right? And in that sense, it's like, okay, so you still have some elements from the Michael Bay movies, in the sense of like, okay, there's a MacGuffin that everyone's after, and you have to go from this location to this location, and it's just that kind of thing, right? Like there's always a thing that everyone's fighting over, some mystical object, and that's this movie's device. So it does have that, like a lot of the Michael Bay movies do. However, the things this one does better, first of all, it's in general, the action is shot better. It feels like the Michael Bay movies, a lot of it is filmed wide, and because the character designs in those movies were mostly just piles of gray metal scrap, right? Like a lot of it is just gray colored, metal colored, right? And so in those Michael Bay movies, when you have two Transformers fighting each other, this was always my biggest criticism, was that you couldn't actually tell who is who. I remember there were scenes in those movies where you had, one of the Autobots fighting some random Decepticon that just attacked them, and I genuinely could not tell which one was the Autobot and which one was the Decepticon. So like this whole action scene is playing out in front of me, and it's just like this gray blur. I had glasses on, yes, it was genuinely like just like the camera keeps on switching angles, and they both just look like gray metal masses of humanoid shape. I can't tell what's happening. So that's the good thing in this movie. The action, you can actually tell the characters apart. You can tell who is fighting who and what's going on. They all look distinct from each other. So, as far as action goes, it's like, oh, okay, good, thank you. That's like that was a big thing in those Michael Bay movies. Now, the other thing is that the humor in this one, the Michael Bay movies have, what would you call it? Frat humor, I guess you would call it. Like it's just some half of it was just gross out humor, and the other half of it was just like adult references to something, right? Like if it's like an innuendo or whatever. And this movie has a little bit of that, right? But for the most part, this is still very much leaning towards a family-friendly type humor. And Pete Davidson's character Mirage in this one, he very much takes the center stage, and the humor works. It does. He's got the Pete Davidson personality with the robot this whole time. He's always like, dude, chill out. Like it works for this movie. Speaking of Mirage, so unlike most movies in the Transformers series, the main character, I would argue, is, or at least the main Autobot, is Mirage. It's not Optimus Prime, although he gets plenty to do on his own, and it's definitely not Bumblebee, because first major surprise of the movie, Bumblebee gets taken out of commission very early on in this movie. He gets taken out in the first fight, and we do not see Bumblebee again until the end of the movie. And the reason that's shocking was because obviously the last movie was Bumblebee. He was the main character of that movie, right? So for him to be just like taken out for almost the entirety of this one was really shocking. But I think it was ultimately a smart move, because throughout the Michael Bay Transformers movies, Bumblebee was like the main one that was hanging out with Sam Witwicky and all that, right? And then of course he got his own solo movie, so like we're kind of trained for Bumblebee to be the main one that we're like focusing on, right? Even though he doesn't really talk. So to take him out and put Mirage in really worked. You know, I think that was a really smart idea because you actually kind of grow to care, like, okay, I care about Mirage and I care about this new human companion that they've put in here. Which, by the way, that new human, I'm forgetting his name. Yeah, this is my fault. It was really late last night. But that also really works. Normally the humans in these movies is the problem, you know, especially I think later on when it got to what's his name, Mark Wahlberg, right? I think that's definitely when the humans were like, why even put the humans? Who cares about the humans? But I think they actually managed to make them work, and they made them, you know, funny enough to where it's like, okay, I do care about what's going on here. You got the emotional link with the little brother being sick, and you know, I think they could have given the girl more to do. You know, she was like a museum researcher, I guess, or artifact researcher, and so she played her role in the plot. But it does feel like okay, you could have given her more of a personality, a little bit more, you know. But in any case, the humans really worked, I think, in this one. So between that and Mirage really working, you know, this movie has just a lot of stuff going for it. I will say the actual what do they call them? The Beast Transformers, the Maximals. That's right, the Maximals. Now, I watched Beast Wars growing up. I did, but I was very young, and I'd be lying if I said I remembered everyone's names and what the plot even was. But I remember when I see images of the show, I'm like, yeah, I definitely watched this at some point. But in any case, they show up around the second half of the movie, and half of them I don't think get any lines at all, you know. So they're definitely not all there to be like characters in this movie. They're kind of there for the action scenes, and you can even say that about a couple of the Autobots. I think there's this one guy, one Transformer that has like glasses and an accent, and he gets like a really funny line when he shows up, but I don't think he does anything else for the entire movie. I think he's just in the action scenes, you know. So there's definitely still like that, okay, this is to sell action figures to kids, and that's all it's supposed to be, right? Which is fine. I mean, that's all Transformers ever was, so it's not like this is like out of character for the franchise, right? But yeah, half the Transformers sometimes don't talk, but in essence, you get more screen time with characters like Mirage and Optimus Prime, who, by the way, they actually gave Optimus Prime a character arc in this one. Like, he's like, normally he's just like pure stoic, and he gives like those grand speeches, and it's like, oh, you're cool, Optimus, you know, but you're not really like a character. You're more just like a guy that's supposed to be the one everyone looks up to, right? But in this one, he actually has to learn to care about humans. Like, at the beginning of this movie, he does not give a damn about humans or Earth or anything like that. He just wants to go back home. He wants to get his people back home because they're in the middle of this war on Cybertron, right? So that was actually pretty interesting. They actually tried to give him something to do, you know? So I thought that was actually really good. So that way, by the end of this movie, he cares about humans and he cares about Earth, you know? Like, so he didn't just start off just like this pure, you know, loving all forms of life kind of guy, right? He didn't just start off as the Jesus figure. He had to become that, you know? And then, you know, they're trying to stop Unicron from showing up. Unicron is definitely just like the shadowy Galactus type figure that the minions who were sent here, I don't remember their names. I'm sure it had some robot-y sounding name, but they're not Decepticons. That's the interesting thing. There are no Decepticons in this movie. It's the Autobots, it's the Maximals, and it's the guys that Unicron sent down, his henchmen, who are actually, they managed to make pretty threatening. I mean, that first fight where Bumblebee gets killed, they beat the shit out of the Autobots. Like, the Autobots don't stand a chance in that one. It was actually kind of shocking. I was like, oh damn, they're not getting any hits in. They just took a loss in that one. So that was, you know, they managed to make them feel like an actual threat. There's only like 3 of them, but they beat the shit out of the Autobots. But yeah, just the movie has, you know, very similar to take a Michael Bay plot, but actually make it done better, you know. So it's all about execution, right? So like the action feels better, the characterizations are better, the human characters are better. So it's like you take all of those same elements that you would expect from a Transformers movie, but it's actually done a lot better than it has been done in the past, right? And it kind of just makes me feel like can you imagine a world where the first Transformers movies that we see are Bumblebee and this one, and it feels like, man, the franchise would be in so much more of a healthy place, and I acknowledge the Michael Bay movies were billion-dollar movies, right? So it's not like they were all like failures or anything, but they definitely had, there was a degradation over time, right? The Bay movies, obviously, like the last one, I think it was The Last Night, right? Number 5, or right? It was it 5? I think it was 5. Anyways, obviously it had diminishing returns. It started to fall off. People stopped caring because, entry after entry, it was just like, these Michael Bay movies are getting worse. It was crazy. But yeah, this one, pretty good, pretty enjoyable. I liked the human characters. I liked the Transformers. I would definitely watch another movie if they came out with a sequel to this one. I would definitely watch it. Now, there is a surprise at the end. A surprise that I remember being talked about years ago. Something that Hasbro wanted to do. And let's just set the scene here, okay? So the main guy, he's not a kid, he's a guy. He was in the army for a little bit, and they established that early on, so that way it's like, okay, so him being able to know some things about, combat situations, it makes sense, right? He was in the army, right? He's been down on his luck since the beginning of the movie. He's looking for jobs. His brother is sick. He's got things he's got to take care of at home, right? So he goes in for a job interview, and this guy in this back office is like, oh, so tell me about your work experience. Tell me where you've been. Tell me what you've been doing. How was Peru? And he's like, whoa. I never said anything about Peru. And he's like, yeah, but that's where you were, right? You and your new friends, right? So it's like, okay, this person knows about Peru, which is the country they had this big battle in. They know about the Transformers. And he's like, look, we are part of a government organization, and we could really use help from you and your new friends. We're in the middle of a war. And my first instinct was, okay, so they're gonna try to incorporate the I think it was Sector 7 from the Michael Bay movies, which I want them to distance from the Michael Bay movies as much as possible. I want to make it clear that this is not that same continuity, because that's the last thing they need, is for people to keep on thinking that this is the same thing, right? So I was kind of like getting disappointed. I was like, oh my god, no, please don't tie that in here. I was like, that's such a Michael Bay thing that you can just leave that out of here, right? And then it keeps going. The guy pulls a lever on a bookshelf, the shelf opens up, and it's this big military warehouse in the back. And then something dawns on me, and I'm like, oh no, they're not gonna do it. No way. Are they actually gonna do this? And the guy's like, all right, just let us know what you think. Give us a call, right? And then the guy flips over the business card that he was handed, and the G.I. Joe logo is on it. And I was like, oh, they did it. They're doing it. Yeah, years ago, it was rumored that Hasbro wanted to incorporate all of their properties into a shared universe, right? Do the Avengers Marvel thing, right? And I remember going like, okay, that's interesting, right? But that was, that was probably like 2015 when I was hearing those kinds of reports. So I definitely did not expect it to happen at the end of this movie. And then I think back to like, oh yeah, they established that he was in the army, and that he, like, it all suddenly makes a lot of sense. He even gets like one of the Mirage, like, turns him into a suit, gives him like a powered Transformer suit at the end of this movie, so he can like do his own fighting. So I'm like, you know what? The G.I. Joe aspect of this makes a lot of sense in this movie. So yeah, I'm excited. I don't know if you just call the next movie Transformers versus or meets G.I. Joe, or they're gonna team up together, and then is it gonna be Cobra and the Decepticons fighting together? There's a lot of possibilities you can do with this, and it makes all the sense in the world, because those Michael Bay movies, again, they had military stuff all over the place, right? Like, obviously I think they were partially funded by the military, so it was a lot of that kind of thing, right? And so in this universe, to, you know, further differentiate, it's like, just make them the GI Joe. You already, you know what I mean, like, you already own the property. It's already like its own military organization. Just do it. It's the GI Joe, right? So here we are. They're I don't know what their plans are for how to continue this, but look, I like this main character. So if they want to use him as kind of the focal point between the Transformers franchise and the GI Joe franchise, I think it works. I think it totally works. So yeah, that was like the big surprise ending by the end of this. So yeah, we oh, by the way, Bumblebee comes back to life. I think I forgot. Did I mention that? I don't know. He dies at the beginning and he comes back to life by the end of it. But anyways, so yeah, that was Transformers Rise of the Beasts. You know, like I said, it has a lot of the same trappings of the other movies, but it's all done better than those movies did it. You know, like the action looks better. I can tell who's actually fighting who. There is still a MacGuffin and all that, but it's like, oh, but Unicron's here, and not just like vaguely hinted at. I mean, like, they show his face. You know what I mean? Like, he talks. The Unicron is really here. He's coming. You know, the bad guys actually feel like a threat. You know, there's only 3 of them, and they actually feel like a threat. So just all around, this was an enjoyable time. You know, it's still a Transformers movie. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like it's somehow like this other franchise completely and it's nothing like those other ones. It is still a Transformers movie, but it's just done better. So yeah, there you go. Rise of the Beasts. If you've seen it, let me know what you guys think, and if this convinced you to go watch it, I think you'll have an enjoyable time. You know, I'm not promising you that it's somehow like this, you know, it's not like this this great critical darling or anything, but it is enjoyable. I had a good time with it. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.